We have seen the classification of acute coronary syndromes in the previous section. Now we are going to consider in detail the clinical presentations, the risk stratification and the treatment aspects of unstable angina and NSTEMI. This will be followed by the algorithms for the treatment and management of these two conditions. So this section on unstable angina and NSTEMI in the next slides. So the diagnosis of acute coronary syndrome. If the patient presents to you with ischemic discomfort, on the presentation you make a working diagnosis of acute coronary syndrome. It could be acute coronary syndrome by the type of presentation, the details of which we will see in the subsequent slides. Then we order for an ECG. If the ECG shows no ST elevation, there is still the lumen is partly patent, and that means there is a subtotal occlusion or incomplete occlusion, non-ST elevation ACS. Suppose there is total occlusion due to plaque rupture and there is no flow going through the artery, then there is ST segment elevation, and that causes the transmural or through and through infarct. So the ECG working diagnosis of ACS, ECG diagnosis NSTEMI, TMI or STMI. Now NSTEMI or STEMI. Then you order for cardiac biomarkers. The biomarkers are raised, then it is NSTEMI. They are normal, then it is unstable angina, and of course in ST segment elevation infarction, the biomarkers are always raised, and that leads to transmural infarct, or that is what is called the through and through infarct or Q-wave myocardial infarction. The final diagnosis will be unstable angina, MI due to non-Q wave or Q-wave infarction, or NSTEMI or STEMI. So look at the various steps. The admission presentation of a chest pain. You take a quick history and suspect acute coronary syndrome. Working diagnosis of ACS. Do an ECG, persistent ST elevation, that is STEMI, and then there is no ST elevation, STT abnormalities are there, or ECG is normal or undetermined ECG. Then you ask for TROP test. The TROP is positive, it is high risk NSTEMI. The troponin is negative first time, repeat it after 6 to 8 hours, the TROP is still negative, ECG is normal or undetermined, then it is a low risk patient, he will have unstable angina. So here the ECG diagnosis, then the biochemical workup, then the risk stratification into high or low risk in case of this NSTEMI unstable angina group, then the diagnosis of STEMI, NSTEMI unstable angina is made, and of course the management will be there. STEMI must be reperfused. The reperfusion strategy can be a primary PCI, which will be the best option, or a thrombolysis. When there is NSTEMI and unstable angina, there are two approaches: early invasive and conservative. Early invasive approach if you seek only in high risk patients, and of course patients with moderate risk also. Sometimes depending on their presentation, they can be taken early invasive for PCI, whereas in the conservative we don't go for any PCI and conservatively treat them with medicines. And remember that there is no question of thrombolysis in case of NSTEMI and unstable angina. What causes acute coronary syndrome? There is a rupture of the plaque. There is thrombus formation. Secondary to unstable angina, or primarily there could be a thrombus formation. There may be unstable angina for some time which has resulted in thrombus formation, or straight away the patient would have got severe rupture of the plaque, major rupture of the plaque, and ended up in thrombus formation. There may be mechanical obstruction to the flow of blood, or there may be dynamic obstruction or spasm, as in case of vasospastic angina or prinzmetal angina. There may be acute inflammation or infection, may be the root cause, or there may be increased oxygen demand by the myocardium, and so much so the flow is compromised, could not meet the demand, and ended up in acute coronary syndrome. There are three important steps in the diagnosis of ACS. The first one is history and physical. We have to decipher which is cardiac chest pain, which is non-cardiac chest pain, which is atypical chest pain based on the history. Then of course we do a 12 lead ECG and if necessary ask for right sided leads also. Then do cardiac biomarkers to stratify whether they are high risk patients or low risk patients. ECG will tell whether there is ST segment elevation myocardial infarction and transmural ischemic infarction, or it is subtotal occlusion, NST-MI and unstable angina, whereas cardiac biomarkers will tell us whether the patient has got unstable angina or NST-MI. What are the various presentations of unstable angina? Rest angina, that is angina occurring at rest or prolonged more than 20-30 minutes. New onset of angina of Canadian Cardiovascular Society 3 or more. So it should be a severe angina precipitated by very minimal effort occurring for the first time. More frequent, longer and lower threshold, which is called crescendo angina. The anginal attacks occurring more frequently than before. They are lasting for longer duration and they are precipitated by simpler and smaller exercise or effort related. So this is crescendo angina, and of course the what are called the angina equivalents. Angina equivalents means people who have who do not have rest angina or new onset angina or crescendo angina, but have dyspnea and diaphoresis and with epigastric symptoms, and these are called the angina equivalents. Particularly occur in women, in diabetics, in old people, in people with CKD and in post-myocardial infarction patients. The presentation may not be pain, but may be due to angina equivalents. What will be the clinical presentation like in terms of symptoms and signs? Classical central ischemic chest pain, impending doom. Pain or heaviness in the arms, usually the left arm, radiating down the elbow and to the fingers. Discomfort in the neck or jaw or back and retrosternal region or epigastric region. Autonomic upset. They don't have pain, they may present with autonomic upset, sweating, vomiting, nausea, particularly an inferior valve myocardial infarction. And these are sometimes referred to as angina equivalents. Remember, any pain above the umbilicus, below and up to the level of the mandible, below the maxillary bone, could be due to cardiac origin. Signs, autonomic signs like increase in the heart rate, change in the blood pressure, either increase or decrease, sweating and pallor. Exacerbating factors like anemia, hypertension, cyanosis or fever may be seen. Signs of complications like LVF, arrhythmia and hypotension and cardiogenic shock may be noted. Murmurs of aortic stenosis, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, carotid bruit and other vascular diseases may be noted, and these are some of the signs that we can find out in a patient. ACS presentations for triage. How do we segregate these patients and send them? Chest pain or severe epigastric pain, non-traumatic in origin, typical of myocardial ischemia or MI, a central or substernal compression or crushing pain, pressure, tightness, heaviness, cramping, burning, unexplained indigestion, belching, epigastric pain, radiating pain in the neck, jaw, shoulders, back or one or both arms, dyspnea and sweating, severe diaphoresis, nausea, vomiting and epigastric pain in the elderly, in women, in diabetics, in CKD and in the post-myocardial infarction. These, which are listed here in yellow color, are called angina equivalents. In such a patient, the first thing that we need to do is not anything else but give him 325 milligrams of soluble aspirin, acetyl salicylic acid, and ask for an immediate ECG. Canadian Cardiovascular Society classification CCS. The CCS 1, angina with 10 years activity only. CCS class 2, Angina with moderate activity walking more than 2 blocks or a stairs, more than 2 blocks or one flight of stairs. CCS3 angina with mild to mild activity only, that is walking less than 2 blocks or one flight of stairs. And then CCS4 angina that occurs without any activity or that occurs at rest. So these are important for us to classify the degree of patient's disability in terms of angina and to see whether it is improving or worsening. Likewise, KLIP clinical classes are also important. KLIP class 1 means no signs of heart failure, the mortality in them is 6%. And when the presence of S3 gallop and long rails, it is called class 2 KLIP and 17% mortality. When there is pulmonary edema, it is class 3, 30 to 40% mortality. When there is cardiogenic shock, it is 60 to 80% mortality in patients with cardiogenic shock. So, if the patient presents with clinical features of acute coronary syndrome, the immediate step would be to give 325 milligrams of soluble aspirin and analgesia in the form of morphine. Then aspirin ECG, the ECG shows ST segment elevation or a new bundle branch block or a true posterior myocardial infarction, then it is classified as STEMI. If the ECG is normal, consider alternative diagnosis. If the ECG shows ST depression or T wave inversion, then the question is, are the troponins raised? If the troponins are raised, then it is NSTEMI. If the troponins are normal, it is unstable angina. Only one point here, if the ECG is normal in the first instance, we need to monitor the ECG over a period of time, either by cardiac monitor or by serial ECGs, and look for the changes that evolve. Likewise, if the trope test is negative for the first time, we need to repeat the trope test after 6 to 8 hours to classify the patients. So finally, our patients would have been classified into NSTEMI or unstable angina or NSTEMI. STEMI, unstable angina or NSTEMI. Now, the STAT ECG obtained immediately on presentation and monitoring. ST segment depression of more than 5 millimeters in 2 contiguous leads plus symptoms, symmetric T inversions of more than 2 millimeters in the precordial leads. Obtain supplemental ECGs leads in V7, V8, V9 in patients whose initial ECG is non-diagnostic to rule out MI due to left circumflex occlusion, so much so it would be more posterior, so we need to look at ECG leads of V7, 8 and 9. Obtain right-sided leads recording V2R to V6R if 12 lead ECG is normal to identify RV infarct in a patient who has got symptoms of acute infarction. Or if the patient is presenting with inferior wall infarction, all the more we should look for right ventricular leads to quantify and see whether there is RV infarct. Continuous ECG monitoring is better than serial ECG in patients if initial ECG is non-diagnostic. Normal ECG, remember, does not rule out acute coronary syndrome. New onset bundle branch block, either left bundle branch block or right bundle branch block, more commonly LBB, is equivalent of acute coronary syndrome. How do you know it is new onset? If we have previous ECGs, we can say whether it is new onset or old bundle branch block. There are no previous ECGs, we have to presume any bundle branch block with chest pain symptoms to be a new onset bundle branch block. Patients can be stratified based on the ECG findings into low risk, medium risk and high risk. Low risk patients are those who have normal ECG or who have flat or T inversion of less than 1 millimeters. In such individuals, repeat the ECG after few hours or have a continuous monitoring. Patients who have medium risk or ST segment depression of 1 millimeter or less, T inversion of just more than 1 millimeter. Okay, and such individuals we have to STEMI urgent treatment will be required. If there is STEMI, if there is ST segment elevation, then it requires urgent treatment. High risk patients are those who have transient ST segment elevations or ST depression of more than 1 millimeter or deep T inversions. If they have any one of these features, then they go into high risk. Based on the ECG, we can stratify the patients into low risk, medium risk and high risk. Of course, patients who have got ST segment elevation are certainly high risk group and they are classified as STEMI or urgent treatment. After the ECG, the next step would be cardiac biomarkers. There are three biomarkers that we can look at: the myoglobin, the troponin, and the CKMB. Myoglobin appears very early and falls very early, whereas troponin appears quite early and then will persist for a long time. Whereas CKMB, that is creatinine kinase myocardial band, will appear early and also disappear after about 1 day or so, which we can see in the next slide. So these are the three important biomarkers. The differentiation into sort of biomarker positive and negative is essential to classify them into unstable angina or NSTMI. So we have to think of only three biomarkers. Forget about all the previous ones: SGPTs, LDH, SGOT. All those things are not required today. We require to do only three types of biomarkers, mostly two, either TROP-I-RT or CKMB. Even myoglobin may not be required. If we do TROP-I-RT, both of them are equally sensitive and equally specific, and they are very specific for cardiac muscle necrosis, myocardial necrosis, myofibril necrosis. They start rising between 3 and 6 hours, the peak between 24 hours to 36 hours, and remember, TROP-I-RT lasts for 5 to 14 days, whereas CKMB starts at 2 to 6 hours, peaks in 12 to 18 hours and lasts up to 1 to 2 days and then comes back. This is very useful to find out reinfarctions in patients who have post myocardial infarction, angina, and then who go in for repeated infarctions, whereas TROP-I will be continuing to be positive even after the first episode for up to 14 days, and CKMB, or that is creatinine kinase, that is myocardial band fraction, is moderately specific. Never order the total CK, which is not essential for myocardial infarction. In myocardial infarction, we require the CKMB fraction. Myoglobin, not specific for cardiac myocyte, but still whenever there is a necrosis of skeletal or cardiac muscle or smooth muscle, myoglobin rises, starts within 1 to 2 hours, very early to rise, in peaks in 6 to 8 hours, lasts in 20 to 24 hours. Remember, it is non-specific, but if we are curious, we can find out in a very early stage whether there is a necrosis of the myocardium by looking at the myoglobin marker. But only two important markers, TROP-I-RT and CKMB, are important. If the initial biomarkers, remember, are negative, and they must be tested repeatedly, at least for another 1 or 2 occasions after 8 hours, to confirm that we have not missed the persons who do not have who are in the early phase. So just like with the ECG, based on the troponin T test, we can risk stratify the patients into low risk, medium risk and high risk. If the serum trop T value is less than 0.06 micrograms, or in such a case we call it as low risk patient, and the 5-month myocardial infarction or death rate is only 4.3% in them. In patients with medium risk, serum troponin T will be between 0.06 to 0.18 micrograms. The 5-month deaths for myocardial infarction or death would be 10.5%. In high risk patients, serum troponin T is usually more than 0.18 micrograms, and the death rate in them is as high as 16.1. So from a low risk 14.3% risk to a highest of 16.1, we can surmise and say, depending on the trop value, this is called quantitative estimation of the troponin. So if we have an ECG and the troponin quantitative, we can stratify the patient whether he is low risk or medium risk or high risk. So depending on that, the further management would be decided. So what are the other non-invasive tests that could be of use in a patient with unstable angina or NSTEMI? Chest X-ray to assess pulmonary edema, 2D echocardiography for wall motion abnormalities, left ventricular failure, left ventricular hypertrophy, aortic stenosis, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, which could be the cause of acute coronary syndrome. Full blood count to rule out anemia and look at the platelets and also look at the leukocytosis. Biochemistry for renal function, thyroid function and electrolytes, and of course for the lipoprotein profile. These tests will be highly helpful in further tailoring the treatment. So with this presentation of acute coronary attack of unstable angina or NSTMI, we need to differentiate several other conditions which mimic these syndromes, and the differential diagnosis will be other cardiovascular causes like ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, which requires urgent reperfusion, vasospastic angina or prinzmetal angina, pericarditis, in which case we should not thrombolyze the patient at all, syndrome X, aortic dissection. These are other cardiovascular causes. Respiratory causes like pulmonary embolism, pneumonia, acute respiratory airway obstructive disease, pneumothorax and pneumomediastinum, gastrointestinal causes like esophagitis, esophageal spasm, hiatus hernia, GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, peptic ulcer disease and biliary colic also mimic very much acute coronary syndrome presentation. Other causes include musculoskeletal conditions, teeth syndrome, costochondritis, cervical spondylosis, and of course psychogenic causes of chest pain. Okay, initial decision making depends on two important parameters. Once we can consider acute coronary syndrome, what are the ECG findings, what are the TROP findings? ECG may show ST segment elevation, straight away for reperfusion, STEMI. ECG may show ST segment depression or negative T inversion or normal ECG. In such a case, we do a TROP, and this TROP, if it is positive, they are high risk patients of NSTMI. If they are negative, they are low risk patients of unstable angina or non-cardiac type of chest pain. In patients with ST segment elevation, TROP testing is only of academic interest because we already know that there is a transmural occlusion, transmural myocardial infarction, and there is a total occlusion. By looking at the ECG itself, of course, TROP test will further confirm this particular finding, but there, however, TROP test is not going to help us in classifying the patient into further categories. Look at the predictive value of ST depression. Supposing there is no ST segment depression in the ECG, this is the mortality pattern. The survival at the end of 180 days or 6 months is as high as 94, 92, 93% in people who do not have ST depression. In people who had 1 mm ST depression, the survival has come down to 85%. Whereas in 2 millimeters of ST depression, the survival is of the order of 78%. So, depending on the ST segment, the fate line, we can say predict the mortality. With no depression of ST segment, 1 mm depression, 2 mm or more depression. Depending on that, we can predict. So, further risk stratification of unstable angina and NSTMI, high risk patients resting, severe left ventricular dysfunction, LV ejection fraction less than 35%, severe exercise LV dysfunction, LV ejection fraction less than 40% during exercise, high risk score on TMT less than -11, perfusion defects on stress, anterior wall perfusion defects, echo evidence of regional wall motion abnormalities in 2 or more areas, stress echo evidence of extensive ischemia. All such patients and those who have got ECG evidence, which you have seen already, and the TROP evidence of the TROP level, the quantitative TROP, they can also classify the patient into high risk or intermediate risk patients are those who have moderate LV dysfunction, LV ejection fraction between 35 to 49%, intermediate TMT score of -11 to +5 Duke score, moderate perfusion defect on stress testing, and then the limited wall motion abnormalities and pharmacological stress testing with dobutamine. These group of patients are classified as intermediate. Who are the patients with low risk as per the stratification? Good LV ejection fraction of more than 50%, low TMT score of more than +5 Duke score, no perfusion defect on stress testing, and then the stress thallium, and no regional wall motion abnormality. What are the risk factors, cardiometabolic risk factors we need to consider in a case of unstable angina or NSTEMI? Diabetes mellitus is a sheet anchor, hypertension, smoking, advancing age, dyslipidemia, family history of coronary artery disease and previous history of coronary artery disease. These will pave way for higher risk factors, and these risk factors are incorporated in working out what is called the TIMI score. This slide very clearly depicts the excess risk that we see in diabetics. The blue bars are the non-diabetics and the red bars are the diabetics. In-hospital mortality very high in diabetics. Non-fatal myocardial infarction also high in diabetics. 1 year all-cause mortality is also high in diabetics. Mortality and MI put together is much higher in diabetics compared to non-diabetics. TIMI risk score for unstable angina or NSTEMI. TIMI risk factors are age more than 65 years, 3 or more coronary artery disease risk factors, stenosis of more than 50% by angiography, ST segment deviation, either elevation or depression, angina more than 2 times in 24 hours, aspirin intake less than 7 days, increase in the biomarker STROP or CKMB. There are 7 parameters which we have to look at, and when we look at those parameters, people who have 0 or 1 risk factor and R2 risk factor, these are classified as low risk TIMI class. People who have 3 and 4 risk factors are called medium risk. Those who have 5, 6 or 7 risk factors are called the TIMI high risk. Look at the mortality. So why we classify them in low, medium and high? Because we can see the graph here. People who had low risk status, they have very little mortality. The death and myocardial infarction in 14 days is as low as 10%. With medium risk factors, the death and myocardial infarction is as much as 20%. And those with high risk factors, the death could be anywhere between 30 to 40% if there are high risk factors. So TIMI risk model is highly predictive of the prognosis of the patient, and we need to stratify the patient either based on the previous classification or on the ECG or based on the TROP test or based on the composite index like the TIMI risk score, which will be better. There is another model called the GRACE model based on the GRACE data predictors of in-hospital mortality. Again, this also incorporates similar factors like advancing age, Killip class, whether they have heart failure or not, and then systolic blood pressure, ST segment deviation, cardiac arrest during presentation, serum creatinine level on admission, positive initial cardiac biomarkers and heart rate. And each is associated with certain odds ratio, as you can see here, 1.7 for old age, 2 per Killip class, 1.4 for systolic BP of 20 millimeters higher, 2.4 for ST segment deviation, and 4.3 for cardiac arrest, 1.2 for serum creatinine of 1 milligram per deciliter and above. And then positive initial cardiac biomarkers, 1.6 odds ratio, heart rate 30 beats or more increases odds ratio by 1.3. So this is how the GRACE data is there, and when we look at the dynamic GRACE data model, we can actually punch these numbers, these variables, and find out the GRACE score, as you can see in the GRACE score model. In other words, what are the factors that predict the prognosis in a given patient? Because the relatives keep on asking you, what will be the prognosis? Parvalya, is it okay for the patient? Will he recover? To answer those questions, we require to know certain important parameters. What is the age of the patient? The older the patient, the poorer is the prognosis. Men have poorer prognosis compared to women, particularly before the menopausal age. ST segment elevation is associated with poor prognosis. The higher the ST segment elevation, the poorer the prognosis. In terms of millimeters of ST elevation, it has got its own significance. Prior myocardial infarction keeps the patient at a very poor prognosis. Diabetes presence or absence is a very strong factor which determines the prognosis. Triple markers, which we will shortly see in the subsequent slides. These triple markers are nothing but the troponin, the CRP, and the B-natriuretic peptide. Patients aspirin use, previous aspirin use, in spite of the aspirin, if they are developing ACS, they are at a higher risk. The time lag, the duration of time that has elapsed between pain and the presentation of the patient for treatment also has got a bearing on the prognosis. Presence of left ventricular hypertrophy and ejection fraction, the decrease in the ejection fraction have got a strong say on the prognosis. Of course, chronic kidney disease associated with ACS has got poor prognosis. Look at this graph here. We all may be thinking that non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction is relatively less dangerous compared to ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. It is true. In the initial stages, in the first few months after the heart attack, ST segment elevation infarction carries a worse prognosis compared to NSTEMI. As you can see at the end of sort of 2 months, or at the end of 1 month, the NSTMI only 5% mortality, whereas here STMI the mortality is around 15%. But if you look at the long term data and how these two types of people are doing at the end of 15 months, absolutely there is no difference between NSTMI and STMI, because majority of the patients who have NSTMI, they develop frank occlusion and develop major acute coronary events during the course of the next 1 year, and they will become patients of STMI, and they will face the same prognosis as STMI at the end of 1 year or 1.5 years. So this is another way of looking at the same information. You see here STEMI versus NSTEMI, hospital versus 1 year mortality. So here this is the mortality in the hospital, and this is the mortality in 1 year. So hospital mortality is very high for STEMI compared to NSTEMI, whereas 1 year mortality is quite high for the NSTEMI compared to STEMI. So on the whole, patients of STEMI, they do not do well in the hospital, but those who survive, they are better off compared to those NSTEMI patients who run a risk of recurrent acute coronary events, and then they succumb. Finally, the mortality trends will be the same for both NSTEMI and STEMI.